Hello.
Hello, Martin. Can you hear me?
I can perfectly.
Okay, good.
Sound
How
okay here?
grand? It's grand. How are you?
I'm good actually. Yeah. And yeah, it's nice and warm, but yeah, it's good. So we finally get to have a chat.
I know. Whereabouts are you bringing from?
I'm in Nice at the moment.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Well, Enniscrone is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's
Yeah.
pretty overcast today, but it's
Oh,
grand.
get out. Listen, from what I've heard, the weather's been amazing.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah. I,
Crazy.
I have to ask, did you play golf or anything like that down there?
No, not really. Golf is pretty big down there. I'm more like surf and stuff like that.
Yeah.
More of a surfer, but I played golf when I was a kid, but I was more like Happy Gilmore. I dressed in a
Yeah.
Spider-Man t-shirt and shorts and was
That's
like,
the way you do it. Do you know what I mean? But I have to admit, I was down in Enniscrone, and there's been quite a change I noticed over the years, and it was fantastic. It was just so all the idea of and forgive me now that this I could ruin the whole conversation by saying this now because you
no,
like,
you keep
but
fine.
what I loved about it was that all of the old ideas of Irish holiday homes or Irish holidays, right, were gone, and it was like now we've embracing the weather, embracing everything, and it was just I couldn't get over how vibrant everything was, how good the food was. Like the
Yeah, the food's good now.
yeah, there's what's that? This pub there's a pilot is at the pub.
Pilot Bar, yeah,
Yeah,
great food there.
yeah. I was just thinking, oh, this is amazing. When did
Yeah, yeah.
so I fell in love with Sligo again. So I'm a big fan.
It was a lot different when I was a kid because there used to be, I think there was about 600 people here when I was a kid, which was great for me because I'm a hermit. Like, I'm just like, I'd love to live on an island by myself if I could, but you can't now, but like we used to, my grandparents used to own the hotel across from me. So it was like we had this big view of the bay. It was like incredible because there was like no places there. And then of course they knocked it and put a load of shit houses up as you do, you know. So should have been a listed building, but that's
Oh,
Ireland
good.
for you.
Yeah, well, that's the hermit's love.
Yeah. Well, I think all musicians are a bit hermity, aren't they?
um, yeah, 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 I think so. I'm pausing there to go. Like I've been away now for a while,
Mm,
and yeah, so yeah, hermit.
yeah.
But I feel very much connected. But yeah, I know what you're saying. There's yeah, um, that's an interesting.
Because there's a certain comfort. There's a certain comfort in your little. I know, right? In my little studio, I have a certain
Yeah,
comfort. You know what I mean? Especially
yeah,
when you're kind of making music, you kind of feel this kind of comfort.
and it's very true now more than ever. Where I'm just going to close that window, but where say kind of the kind of cliched appeal of being in a band. I'm sure that still exists.
Hmm.
So much more is now actually, and for the last, I guess, 20 years, has gravitated towards this notion of working collaboratively but in isolation with computers and
Yeah.
laptops, which is great because it allows that hermit bit to
Yeah.
the community, a community of hermits. I think that's the kind of
Yeah. Though to be fair, I do rather like kind of recording. I'd rather record in person with people. Like I went to Sweden and did an orchestra for my first record, and then the second one that I'm working on, I did online, which is cool doing it online, but there's nothing better like than being in person. You see all these people playing your arrangements. It's just like, oh my God, it's like best feeling in the world. So there's that kind of weird dichotomy, like I suppose.
that makes you like a yellow belt hermit.
Yeah. Hey, as long as
As
we're musicians, that's fine.
long as
That's
you work
a
with an
hermit.
orchestra, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. You know, what do you think about like the whole area of how music has gone, we'll say from I know I've got a Beach Boys t-shirt, Brian was a t-shirt from like 60s of like we'll say the Wrecking Crew playing all together to kind of mostly things done or like individually now. Because there's a certain about this, is the sound of a load of people playing together and bleeding. There's a certain sound that you just cannot replicate, I don't think, doing individually.
Yeah. Um, I like the romanticism of the Wrecking Crew. I like the romanticism of the Funk Brothers.
Mm.
I particularly like the romanticism, like little Stevie Wonder being the come on in, kid, pick up whatever you like, groove on the track, and all that. But I've always been, and if we put someone like Prince as being over there, do you know what I mean? As a kind of like superhuman type figure that doesn't really count. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Just because you can play everything, so he is the Wrecking Crew. Do you know what I mean? Like, but you know what I'm getting at. Like,
Yeah.
um, I do kind of like the one person tinkering around, fumbling around in the studio. Um, and what comes to mind there is probably a good mid ground is probably Sly Stone, like
Right.
where you've got Sly and the Family Stone, definitely one of the great bands. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And then you've got Riot going on where nobody knows who played and what because everybody was too wasted over too long and whatever, who was it, what. And
Yeah.
he sounds, if you think about it, I was trying to think of the Sly Stone is like Columbo. Do you know what I mean?
All right.
Kind of that kind of idea of not quite knowing what's happening, where you are with this, and that. But that's very much what occurs with for the listener too. You get
Mm.
drawn into that particular world. So yeah, I think the idea of bands working and house bands, yeah. But I think there's also that kind of just eccentric kind of exploration that I'm also drawn to. Do you know what I mean? And I think that speaks more clearly to our use of technology now as well. Do you know what I mean? Where we're
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can speak, like it's hard to speak for other people, but like I play a lot of instruments, but I'd love to just rather have loads of people doing it. Because, do you find that you can be very critical of your own stuff? Like even if you do something, you're like, I can always admire when someone does something for me rather than me doing it, if that makes sense.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah. From my point of view, I know that I was never a musician, so that's not a term that I could ever identify with. Um, so, which was kind of weird because when I first started, I was a keyboard player,
Mm.
and it was always kind of strange because you'd end up at someone's house, uh, and I was quite young, so I remember many times in someone's house with the parents of another member of the band, and they go, "Hey, whatever, you play the piano, don't you? Like, who plays a song?" And they'd have to go, "He's not that kind of keyboard player," which now makes sense, but at the time was just like was kind of weird. They'd look at you like, "What?"
Yeah.
And with good reason. So yeah, what was I saying there? Sorry, I just I
We
blanked out through
we
true
were
trauma.
we were talking about, I was saying how you can appreciate, well, I can appreciate people playing more with, how would I say it? I can appreciate it with someone playing something that I wrote rather than me playing it. No matter how good or bad I play it, I think that's why, like I was saying about like we were talking about the romanticism of the Wrecking Crew. There's just something kind of cool about that.
Well, there absolutely is, and also something that shouldn't be forgotten and needs to be brought through, but not, as I say, it's balanced,
Mm.
uh, yeah, a balanced perspective. And yes, and to answer your question, I can definitely, I could definitely say that anybody who's ever played anything on any instrument that I attempted to play played it better than I did. There's no question about that.
That's funny.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, funny. That's accurate. That's like, I mean.
You'd a lot of you'd hit some Billboard and everything. Like
Yeah,
that must
yeah.
have been wild.
It was at the age I was at. Yeah,
Oh wow. What
yeah.
age you when that was happening?
I was in my early 40s.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. It was kind of cool. It was funny. It happened by accident. I'd left music in all its shapes and sizes, and what happened was that I got married, and oh God, this no, maybe go. My late wife, but it's important to explain this because she got me back into it. So when I stopped working in music and stuff, I actually went back to making music because freed of the responsibility to have to do it for any reason, I
Hmm.
started making music again. And then she was going, and what's this? And I go, oh yeah, this is my disco stuff. And she goes, oh yeah. And what's this? And I go, blah. And so I had all these different types of things. And she sent it off to a radio station in New York. I can't remember what it was called. It was a very cool radio station that we knew a DJ on. And cut a long story short, because I was available for absolutely no budget, I became artist in residence at this thing called the Seaport Music Festival in New York,
Wow.
which was really like where all of like it was like a free festival that people like Grimes would have played her first show,
Cool.
XX, and then to have people like Suicide, like and New York Dolls, legendary bands, great programming, and me because I was cheap, right? And so we started releasing these records, and I could release whatever I liked, and yeah, and then they kind of took in a peculiar way took off. So so there you go. Yeah. So yeah,
Wow.
that was so that there. Yeah, there you go.
That's a cool kind of message because the music industry always tells you that, about age. Like,
Yeah,
oh, you're too low. I remember meeting a record guy who I won't say. He told me I was too old at 25. I was like, huh?
yeah,
And it kind of made me feel weird. Like, it made me feel really like, oh shit, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's that,
I mean, that's just a terrible load of bollocks because the I mean, I'm sure there are certain genres, but I'd be hard pressed to think of what they are now. And one of the worst parts about, like, I remember when I first started playing music. I was 17. I played at Slane.
oh,
Um,
wow, that's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Not on my. I wasn't a headline actor or anything. You know what I mean?
Still,
Like,
that's class.
yeah, no, but it was unusual. And unfortunately, I probably thought at the time that this was the way things would continue to go, right? Um, but the year before, or was it the year after, the Rolling Stones were playing, and all over the newspapers with the idea of going, can you imagine? They're in their 40s. Oh my God, look at them, right? Like that's what the prejudice was at the time, was like rock and roll, hope I die before I get old, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet in other genres, you know, at the same time we have folk music where, you're only getting good when you're in your 60s, you know. But you're not saying, a country artist, how can you sing those songs unless you've lived that life?
Yeah, exactly.
So there is that kind of um, total um, just and I just suddenly went through a whole list of reasons which you know about why about the dangers of youth and music and exposure and the commercial pressures that come
Hmm.
and all of that. Do you know what I mean? So but but now that nobody's really employed in music anymore, a lot of that's kind of because that person who said you are too old, they're going to turn around and now and say to you, hey kid, you're too old at 25 for what? You won't offer me anything. Yeah, well yeah, okay, I can offer you fame. Yeah, get out of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there isn't the economic returns or the promise of that there once was, which is a good thing in if only in the sense that that bullshit doesn't really matter. You now have to make music or be involved in music because that's what you do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could be herding goats or, you know, do something else. But if you decide to do music, it's with the same probably career aspiration that you would have had when I started out as a poet. Same kind of career prospects. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's like if you look at like someone like Charles Ives, I think he worked. I don't know, did he work as an accountant or something? Then he'd work as I think he was a accountant or something. And then by nighttime he'd write all these orchestrations. There's something I love about that, like a guy who's just so like that's a musician. You know what I mean? We can get wrapped up in this whole thing of like, oh, I need to make it, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and you kind of lose sight sometimes of why you did it in the first place.
And Flann O'Brien,
Um.
Flann O'Brien, not the musician, but the writer, again,
Okay.
a different type of idea of the, you know, he was a civil servant for most of his life.
Right.
And so wasn't the kind of, you know, um, the Beckett or the Joyce idea of, which is kind of very much a kind of a rock and roll tradition of heading off, you know, follow the muse and, you know, give yourself to the art and,
Kerouac and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, you know, most musicians now, if you think about it, like, you know, have to have at least two jobs to
Hmm.
to to work at being a musician, which is an awful state of affairs, but hopefully that can be changed, you know.
Because like money in music of that is kind of very much a 20th century thing. Before that, it's not like, a lot of
Well, I'm not
composers
that
would.
old, you know, in fairness. Like, um, I can't tell you from lived experience,
No, but
but
I mean, as like the 60s, there was a lot of money in music as like that was the period of like, would say, where there was a lot of money up until the 90s or Napster, whatever the fuck it was. But, like it's kind of gone back to the days of like where people were like court composers and, they were kind of, they had jobs, but they did music too. Like Bach, no one knew Bach for like until 200 years after he died.
yeah, he was. They were trying to break him a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a good gag. I'm sorry, I'll try it. But the fact about it is the um the thing is, I do think there's a lot of truth, especially in understanding digital practices, to look at what the oral traditions of music were, uh,
Okay.
and there's so many parallels. But I don't go with um, the outcome that means that you shouldn't be able to um, get a car loan if you work in music, or that if you want to have a kid, that you shouldn't. That's something you might decide not to do because you can't. Like, there's no reason when music is worth as much as it is now, which is an all-time high, and that music is everywhere in our lives, that we can't figure out some way of slightly better distribution in all of the loot,
Hmm.
so that it's not as extreme as it is. And I really do believe that that's not even rocket science. I think that has to change, and it will have to change.
Do you think it will change? Like,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, at the root of all of my work at, say, in AI, which I'm assuming is why you wanted to chat to me.
it's got sidetracked. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. But that's the base part of it. That's what it comes down to. And we can talk about the technology, we can talk about the ethical implications, the legal parts, but at the end, the bit you can stick on the back of a postcard is there's an opportunity to use the new technology to fix a few things that have been very wrong for a very long time. And
Right.
anyone who tells you that that's not the case, well, again, just follow the money. See who it is that's saying that to you, because it is possible, and it's not complicated. And so there's a spectrum between paranoia on the one side and hope, and the paranoia dystopian stuff is too easy. So this leans into the other side, of going, it's a bit more interesting to see what if that was the case, how would that look? How could that be designed? And what would you need to do in order to get there?
Mm.
But if you I guess we're coming to the end of the equation there, because I have to explain how I came to that conclusion. Otherwise, it would sound quite radical and separated from anything, any form of logical progression.
Mhm. I was gonna ask you about because it's been in the news obviously a lot because obviously when the Beatles do something, everything gets in the news. I think there's that misconception that they're using AI to kind of do the track, where it's really they're just kind of cleaning up the track and taking Lennon's voice and
Yeah,
making it away, subtracting it. Do you think that's there's a lot of misconceptions with regards to AI in the public?
always.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also one of the really interesting things that I think is occurring is that the conversation is much more elevated now than it was, and that's really important.
Mm.
So regardless about whatever happens to music and hermits and stuff like that, AI is in all aspects of life, and um, our engagement within technology really does require everybody to be kind of on the ball to an extent to know what the hell is actually going on. Um, and all of this conversation that's occurred, especially in the last 6 months, means that the stuff that, for instance, would have been at the sharp end of a PhD for me 3 years ago is
Mm.
now stuff that you get asked on daytime radio. Like, you know what I mean? So
Mm.
that, to me, that's only a good thing because it means everybody's kind of getting to the stages. Part of that process, of course, is that there's always going to be hype or misunderstandings. And in Paul McCartney's case, yeah, it was misunderstood, but that was one of the great misunderstandings, right? I believe. And why is that? So um, I ended up being asked, and I'm not sure why they asked me. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not like I know it, I have any association. I don't know. It just shows you how few experts there are out there, right? But I ended up doing loads of interviews specifically about that question. Right? It
All
was like,
right.
oh yeah, no, seriously. You'd be going, well, why are you asking? But anyway, point was, it was too funny, right? Um, and and what appeared though was a much bigger question. The bigger question you could ask was, which is what I asked, was I said, look, he's not using AI. He's just using stem separation and technologies that we would all use anyway to enhance how things sound
Yeah.
like, right? So it doesn't matter whether that's AI or not. But the bigger question is, what if he could bring back John Lennon? And I said, Rick, he should. And he should bring back George Harrison and they should make a double album. And, and like, come on, why not? Like, and everybody's going, what? You can't be asking, why not? Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney and Beatles want to use technology. Come on, for God's sake. Wouldn't it be great? Like, and so that's kind of that I think when I said that surprised a lot of people. But I was just there going, come on, like I'd love to hear that.
Would you really?
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to hear what he would do with it.
Right. But is that not you're getting into kind of ethical things then? Because we don't know how John or George would feel about it. I know their families can go, well, we approve it in their states, but it's
Yeah, yeah.
still you're taking something out of their,
No, I get it.
you're making a decision for them.
Well, I mean, okay. So humor aside, yes, there's definitely questions about that, right?
Hmm.
And many which could only be settled with a Ouija board, right? But ultimately, here's the thing: there's a lot of. Have you heard a lot of the John Lennon songs that are knocking about?
Yeah, the Day Limbs one, guy got Day Limbs. He did these incredible ones. He did like New, and he did that Paul McCartney song, I Don't Know Why, which is a
Mm,
great, like, that's, to me, that sounded incredible. I was like, oh
yeah,
my God, some of them sound terrible, but some
yeah.
of them, his ones sounded great.
Maybe you send me a link to that
Oh,
because
well, he's done Beach Boys ones too, and they sound phenomenal. Like, he did Old Man River and stuff like that. It's like this one guy called Day Limbs. I'll send you them. Like, they're
yeah,
brilliant. Like,
I'm curious because before the Paul McCartney thing blew up, there was a strange. Was this one of the, again? I was going to say strange coincidence. But, in this whole area, everything is very strange. Coincidences, no, seriously, are like a business plan. Do you know what I mean? Um, and I heard the night before the Paul McCartney thing was announced, I came across this song. I was John Lennon, fake John Lennon singing Space Oddity, right?
Heard that one too.
Yeah, what did you think?
It's okay. Wasn't there's parts of it there's parts of it, but then it can draw me out of it again like that. There's I think just some of it, especially when there's the auto tune, it just takes me out of it because some of these
Yeah,
people are using auto tune.
yeah. I, 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 I listened to it. I was thinking, this, what is this? What is wrong with this? And it goes going, it sounds like John Lennon in one sense. And then I realized, and this is just a very personal thing, I kind of went, there's no way that John Lennon would have sung it like that.
Right.
And
Like the inflections.
yeah, so I went back to listen to, and I started thinking about Mother, you know? So I went back and I, I think it was 2 nights ago. There was definitely some a bottle of wine involved, right? In my critical listening, right?
Yeah.
I went back to listen to John Lennon singing Watching the Wheels, um, Twist and Shout, um, In My Life. And I started thinking about, and again, Mother. If you listen to, you know the one I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And I just went, AI has allowed me to appreciate John Lennon singing on a whole other fucking level that just no, seriously. I'm sure that some again you've got to bear in mind I'm not a very good musician, right? So and I'm not saying that in a disingenuous way. Anybody who's worked with me will testify to that, right? Um, but my ears were elevated by AI. I really did feel that listening to this, my appreciation of his singing about where the humor would be, how long, the pain that would come through, how he'd craft a melody or a line to be sarcastic or hopeful or
Mm.
threatening, and all those things. And I realized, okay, I'm not sure. Actually, I didn't realize anything other than I was going, I have to thank AI for this. I love Jim Lennon. And this is leading somewhere. Sorry, there you go.
Yeah, there's something about, and then on another aspect, I had a guy who maybe 2 or 3 podcasts ago, he finished off Smile, like the Beach Boys
Oh,
Smile. So he
I've
finished
only
that
heard of
off.
it.
Yeah, he finished off. He did it with Sovitz, that program, and but he added this one part in. Oh, what is it in? Anyways, he added one part and he sent me all the flags anyways, but I must send it to you. And some of it, like I was saying to him, some of it you're like, wow, that is so he can hear it's like, wow, that's like the Beach Boys. And then some of it you're like, that's not like the Beach Boys because with auto tune and just certain things.
Hmm.
But there were moments when I was like, wow, I got those kind of wow moments. And I think because he was so meticulous trying to do the inflections and everything like that, like whereas some people aren't like that meticulous, and you kind of have to be to kind of bring you into it, if you know what I mean.
But again, that's if you're trying to create like the real McCoy, if that's what your job is to um do a facsimile, which again I'm not knocking, do you know what I mean? But like
Hmm.
again, if we look at music and technology, there's always been that clash between someone saying, I don't know, why was I going to use that accent? I won't use that accent. It doesn't make any sense. But they don't sound like real strings, right?
Yeah.
That's not real brass, right? And then somebody else going, it sounds great though, right? And and I think that's how it works. Like, you know, one of the ways I think you can analyze AI technology or the possibility of AI technology as a as a creative tool is to consider that the repurposing of technology from, say, well, everything from saxophones being a joke instrument that then would lead to John Coltrane, to things like feedback being, a technical error that someone says, I think I like my amp with a bit of distortion on it, lead to Jimi Hendrix, to the repurposing of turntables and samplers for hip hop, things like the 808 drum machine being discontinued, and then someone going, so that sounds kind of good to me. Bing Crosby, that other Black revolutionary, militant technologist, bringing in the, whispering over an orchestra. I mean, that's about as radical. That's far more radical than autotune. If you think about it. No, seriously, at the time, like,
Yeah.
That's wild. That's beyond holograms, because that just was inconceivable. And then again later on, he would do the same thing with multi-track recording. The fact that then would come into play because of someone like that you wouldn't associate with. So if we see that we go kind of, okay, well, hang on a minute. There's a general tendency here then in music of the things that can get repurposed.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, we've got AI trying to create these, beautiful fakes, you go, and then you got other people who might just go, yeah, okay, that's great. I love your handbag. That looks identical to a Louis Vuitton handbag, but I was never particularly interested in Louis Vuitton handbags as it is. But I've just put a pair of wheels onto it. Now look at this. And you go, what? And so that becomes something else. And I think that's creatively, that's the moment I'm kind of keeping my eye out for with AI, where humans take it and just go and do something again in like the way that like what would Brian Wilson do with AI?
Yeah, I can imagine like that he probably gets stuck for about 10 years in the studio. Because sometimes too many options, too many options give you, if you have 4 options, you have to do something. But if you have infinite options, I'm just saying for me, I mean, I've been making my last record for 10 years, so I can't say anything to anyone. But I think it's because I have too many options. There's too much. You can constantly go, that snare needs this and that, this. You can get kind of caught up into it. And so I think maybe AI it is a useful tool, but sometimes I just think humans too many options. I've gone on Netflix many times and I've like looked and then I've like, I haven't watched anything. Whereas back in the day, you had a pound and you had to get a VHS and you were like, okay, I have to get this. That's all I can do.
No, there's a lot of truth in that, in the sense of too many options, we become overwhelmed. And that we know that's absolutely true. And that kind of the myth of the long tail showed us that doesn't work out economically, that um, um, music tastes provided with unlimited music choice, well, we all listen to the same stuff. Oh, that was surprising and disappointing, right? However, it doesn't necessarily follow that when it comes to creative tools, the AI has to work out that way.
Right.
And it's not through self-imposed kind of audio kind of puritanism. That's a new term, by the way, of say, I'll only use 4 tracks, or I'll only use 8 tracks, or everything I have to be done is on 1/2-inch tape that then I stick into a bucket of water and mix with 3 ounces of lemonade or something. No, some kind of strict religiosity type thing. It may just be that the fact that there's going to be so much music, and there is so much music, that it does go back to, for instance, what we were chatting about earlier about like the oral traditions, that that music is never really set down in some permanent form, that it just becomes this self-destructing, continually protean, ever-changing. You never have to finish it. Why? Because it's never going to be finished. And in a funny sense, it makes the only reason why you're having difficulty finishing that music, as everybody else does, is that we have this notion that somehow it has to be set down in stone.
Yeah.
Well, that's a kind of that was a break in the narrative of some probably 40,000 years that only occurred 100 years ago. Prior to that, it was like the best you'd get was sheet music to kind of go, look, you figure it out. This is genuine, that person,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that there's too much music in the world. I know that's such probably a stupid ass thing to say, but in the context of when we have too much, do you think it's kind of made music not as important? I know you could say, well, not as important to who, but I mean, for example, I know I sound like an old fart here, but like when the Beatles released an album, it was a huge deal. I know you could say that's the circumstance of that decade, and people didn't have as much, so music was more important. But I feel I don't think music has the same cultural relevance as it used to do. I know everyone still consumes music, and people constantly listen to music, but just in the aspect of like a big album by a big artist doesn't mean as much. Maybe it
Yeah.
does to other people.
No, I
Maybe
go
I'm
with
just
that. I go
no.
with that. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And and one of the reasons is I think artists are to blame.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I can think of all the other reasons. So I'm
Okay.
obviously going to try and think of something.
Okay. Blame
Uh,
what reasons do you think would
I
you
tell you
say the
what,
artist?
I genuinely never thought I would be in a situation where Elton John, I would think of as being a radical voice of the music industry. No, seriously. Like, and he's only saying the kind of stuff that he's always said,
Yeah.
right? But how old is Elton? I mean, no disrespect, it's like 76, 70, whatever. But it doesn't matter whether he's 80s. The
Mm.
point is, you know, he's the militant wing of the music industry. And what do I mean by that? And he says, look, I've been looking at, I'm not going to tour in America. I don't like what's happening there. I think that we need to create more jobs for musicians. Like,
Right.
how do people, and you're there going, yeah, well, this is right on. Yeah. You're going, it's Elton John. Where's, where's everybody else? So if you're talking about why, for instance, big cultural phenomena, where are the big cultural voices?
You think though that
I'm not
that
just asking you seriously. Like, like,
well, probably not for me, but for younger people, maybe like Taylor Swift and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
That
Hey, well,
could be.
that's not to say that her albums are they come out with there's a lot of attention. Taylor Swift is very 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 much
Oh, she's big, but I don't think they move the zeitgeist of like, you know, when I think when albums came out years ago, and obviously there was probably, psychedelic music was coming out, so everything was kind of newer. You could say everything. So uh, everything's been done almost, we could say, but it just
oh,
doesn't
don't
have.
say that. But
Huh?
I don't believe that for a minute. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm just. I kind of feel that in terms of everything's done in the commercial aspect that can be done, as in like there's no real room to be super commercial like you could be in the 60s and 70s and do something maybe a bit more kind of crazy. You couldn't release a song like I Am the Walrus today and RT's going to play it like daytime radio. Do you know what I mean? So that aspect of art has kind of gone. So it
No,
has to be
I disagree.
really why.
Yeah, I disagree. I just don't think anybody's actually making it. I do believe that I don't see any technical or practical reason other than yeah, like come on. Like when I grew up, music it was coming out at the end of punk,
Right.
right? And 2 years before that, a lot of people were sitting around going, and if you think about it, a circle of 1974, 1975, that really did sound and look like the end of music.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Elton John was popular. And he wasn't seen as the radical.
Do you like Elton John or not? I'm wondering there.
What I'm trying to point out there is how things have shifted over the time. You know what I mean? My point about it is that
Poor Elton.
when you least expect it, that's when something brilliant can happen.
Okay.
And we've got all these tools that are really, we do not know what they're capable of and what they might do. And as a result, I think it's more interesting to go, hey, you know what? And I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. Like, and you are probably correct, um, ultimately. But I like to kind of lay that down as a challenge and go, you know, new tools, new ways. Maybe it'll be some form of tech stacking where you're plugging in different forms of new creative generative AI to create some new form of art or communicatives, kind of whatever. But if I was not 25, if I was under 25 now, obviously in that area that was identified to you as where creatives need to live, I think this would be, it'd be such good fun. Like,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yeah.
you
Do,
sound like anybody.
but do you not think that in terms of you want to do something kind of more, I'm not saying you have to use like crazy chords or go out there, but attention spans of people don't dictate that you can kind of do something very like the idea of a concept album, which I love making concept albums, but no one gives a shit about them. I do, but most people don't. But that idea of attention span is so like low. Like I teach kids music, well, teenagers, you know, and they listen to like one song. Like when Kate Bush came out, when sorry, Kate Bush came out, when Running Up That Hill got popular because of
Yeah.
Stranger Things. They were like, "Oh, I love that song." I was like, "Oh, what do you think of the album?" "Oh, I just heard the one song." I'm like, "Did you not listen to the album?" They're like, "No." Like that, their idea of music is like mixtapes now, and that I think
Yeah, well, okay.
I'd like to be wrong. I'm not saying I am right,
An
but
argument in
you
defense of
know,
an argument in defense of your class and of their grandparents, right? Is that there was a time that before the album that the single song,
okay, 50s, I get you.
and before that sheet music. And if we think about it, the idea of length of song, the key of a song, that's all fashion led. But I do think that there are things that are occurring. So the average attention span for a selection of a piece of music is 7 seconds now.
I
Mm.
This is weird.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man, that's weird.
I know when I'm doing the Ableton classes and I tell people it's like what, but
Wow.
that's true. Um, I
Would
do.
you would you find your attention span is as much as it was before phones?
Well, hang on a second. But at the same time, as we see that movement, we also see a movement into longer form podcasts.
That's a good
So,
point.
for instance, we look at somebody like, I don't know if you listen to Lex Friedman.
Oh yeah, yeah, I was listening to him this morning. Yeah.
Right. So, the longest podcast of Lex Friedman was was 4.5 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, or something like that. Whatever. Yeah. When you speak about Netflix, once you decide that you can find something that you want to watch, then, no one thinks it's strange to sit down and watch 4 hours of a program, maybe longer.
Right.
So, so this is the kind of thing that at the same time, the kids that you're saying are going, listen to Kate Bush and they're going, there's just the one song, right? And in fairness, that album was not a Hounds of Love album. Second side of it's hard to listen to. And so there's 3 or 4 brilliant songs on that record. Um, the point is that you might say, well, they just listen to, they're not interested in the album, but they may have watched they may have binged the whole of Stranger Things season in
Oh,
one
for
go.
sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
hang on. Now, when you were younger, like you used to have an intermission during movies that were longer than 3 hours. Do you know what I mean? I'm not being smart, but like, you know,
I
Lawrence of
don't.
Arabia has, I know you weren't born when Lawrence of Arabia came out.
Yeah.
I saw a re-release, but it was an intermission in the middle. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because people couldn't possibly sit in a cinema to that length of time.
Yeah. But how do you translate that over to music that you can't force people to listen to an album, but do you think that people will, you could say with vinyl, a lot of young people now, which is good on another aspect, a lot of people who are younger now are buying vinyl, so they're actually listening to records. I think the way that the media that you listen to a record on does dictate how you listen to it because you kind of have to get up and change it and interact with it.
It's true. It's true. Again, another weird statistic that is there was that um, was that while vinyl sales were increasing, a large percentage, I can't remember what it was, but it was a really large one. It was like 30 or 40% of vinyl were never listened to.
Wow.
And it kind of makes sense in a weird way, right? Because it's the ritual of buying it, and in fact that's not so weird. At the time of CD success, I seem to remember that there was this, at the very pinnacle for record companies of the most successful record was that the buyer would buy one CD a year. There was a certain part of the market that would buy one, and if that happened to be Dire Straits, then that would be the album that would just go bonkers bananas, right? But there was another figure that was around with that, which is that those albums weren't listened to very often. So the consumer behavior is often contradictory. And again, I do think underneath all of this, and I'm not trying to disagree with what you're saying, because fundamentally there is a difference in terms of critical listening, and there's no escaping that. And what that means is that when you had less music, and the fact that you had to get up of your ass and turn over the vinyl, you couldn't just flip through to the next track. You were exposed to music that you wouldn't have listened to, and stuff comes from that. I'll give you an example. I remember, like I'm a huge jazz fan, right?
Me too.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing: I wasn't always, and I was about 21, and I was touring, and our tour manager was a big jazz fan, and he gave me this record, and he said, "I want you to do something." So, but listen to this album, and I was going, "It's jazz," and not fucking listen to it. Right? I was very open-minded at the time, right? He said, "No, what I want you to do is I want just listen to it 5 times." And I put it on, and I was going, "Oh, for God's sake." And I'd later on, in my late 20s, when I first started teaching management music kind of courses, I did it with students then as well. And they had exactly the same reaction, which is listen to it 5 times. The only caveat I got to do was write down on a piece of paper how much you hate it the first time. So I hate this, teacher's a wanker, this is no, seriously, right? And then after 5 times, see what happens. And the album was kind of blue.
Oh, what a beauty.
And everybody's reaction, including mine, was to go, oh. And I think that's the thing that comes from critical listening, exposure to music that you might not like. And if you think about a number of things that we experience of humans in life that move us aesthetically, they're not always the things that I like, shiny and what. Like a lot of it is I like shiny things. I like, new things and things that are novel to the ear or to taste. But some of the things that kind of stick around are the ones that, given an option, you would have got rid of much earlier, but you're so grateful that you ended up having that period of time. So that's the thing with critical listening, and that has a huge impact on music making, a huge impact on music production, everything.
Kind of Blue is such a gateway album, like a jazz. I always tell people, if that are kind of reluctant about jazz, I always go, hey, just listen to Kind of Blue, because it always seems to kind of make people come into that kind of thing, and then you can kind of give them some crazy shit like Ornette Coleman or something like that. That's always the point where they go, okay, I'm at that. That's my cut-off point.
I still hate jazz. Thank you.
Yeah, they go, okay, Kind of Blue is cool, but when you get to Ornette Coleman, people are like, okay, that's too crazy, which I can see. Like, I like it for what it is, but I wouldn't. I'm not going to go on a date and put on The Shape of Jazz to Come. You know what I mean? It's a certain.
But isn't it fascinating? Was it 1956 or 58 that those albums were done?
59.
Was it 59?
Yeah, all those albums came out in 59. Like Take Time Out, Kind of
Yeah,
Blue, Shape of Jazz to
not
Come,
Supreme. Was
not
it?
Supreme. Yeah. Oh no, was that
Oh
62?
no, it's a giant. There's four of them.
Big
Oh,
Train might have been.
it's Mingus.
Yeah,
Uh,
Mingus. Aha,
yeah,
brilliant
and
record.
so you get that. But that to me is very much like those moments where things come around, and you see that within music. So again, it's not romantic. I think I could probably make a reasonable empirical argument that we're kind of overdue one of those great revolutionary moments in time where, you know what I mean, future hermits will look back at this and go, hey, things were looking pretty bleak then in planet music, you know, and
And
then spring 2024, that happened. You know
do
what
you
I mean?
think that's going to be facilitated with AI?
Yeah, I think AI is definitely at it because, but not necessarily in the yeah. No, first of all, what we have to make a distinction. We speak about AI. We talk about AI as like generative AI.
Yeah.
Um, so, but we have to say AI is over all the tools that we use in music and all the ways we promote and da 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 da.
Plugins and everything is
Yeah.
AI plugins and
So that's really important. So yes, on that basis, there's no question that AI will be part of this.
mhm.
But yeah, it's you know, I think an AI can't write that. It's not going to be written by an AI. It's going to be humans doing that.
Hmm. Do you think that labels, once they realize, well, maybe when some of the artists are dead, that they will find some way they could make an AI album of a legacy artist?
Absolutely, I think that's already happening.
Oh, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I tell you this. I tell you exactly how I feel about that. I think at the same time, I think I'd be really curious about hearing uh, Paul McCartney working with John Lennon and George Harrison again, and that's not particularly because I think that you can regenerate them. I just think that I'd be curious to see what that would do, what that would bring out Paul McCartney. So a
Right.
quick example about that. Another album I love is Astral Weeks, and I saw Van Morrison doing that in the Royal Albert Hall, and I was in two minds about it because his gigs can vary between, you know, um, they can they can really um, you don't know what to expect to get. Um,
Okay.
and what was fascinating to see was at the side of the stage, I could see him in a little leather jacket. The band were already playing, and to me, he was just like giddying himself up to go back into the ring with himself. And he went out, and it was amazing. And it
Right.
wasn't that he sang it like note for note perfect or anything like that. He wasn't, damn wasn't, but it wasn't Bob Dylan just going, I'm gonna change the line. Who needs the melody or any he wasn't, he was going into the ring against himself.
Right.
So for Paul McCartney to do that, it's the fact that Paul McCartney might do the most amazing work of his life because he's but for another, say the estate of, without getting into specifics, but say, you know, like the Marvin Gaye estate, he says, not getting into specifics, Marvin Gaye estate, who've been quite litigious in protecting the copyrights.
Yeah.
If they were to bring back um, Marvin Gaye, I'd be asking what's going on. You know what I mean? Because that would not. I don't think that that's, that doesn't make any sense to me, other than cash. Do you know what I mean? And
hmm
it, and if the estate needs cash, I think his fans should just send them checks and to not do it. Cease and desist. Please cash this check in. We love Marvin Gaye. Do not do that.
Yeah.
And but for that reason, does that make sense? And also, you got to think about it from an industry point of view. There's a very, very huge danger of legacy acts becoming immortal.
hmm
And again, the ABBA and the avatars are a great example, I think, of technology be used correctly, because that's them. So why not let them do if that's what they want to do? But there's a world of difference between if it was Sebastian Johann Bach's great grandchildren going, hey, we know what great granddaddy would have liked us to do, and guess what? He's back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's actually back, yeah, but you don't want that, because it stops anybody coming through.
They're doing that with Steve McQueen. He's going to be in a new movie. His estate has allowed them to CGI deepfake, whatever the fuck, see him into a war movie, and I'm like, that is just so weird. Like there's something about when I see those, they look soulless. There's something soulless about it, isn't it? It's just like it's like, yeah, it's them, but it's not, I'm looking through them.
Yeah. The only problem with that, though, is that, that's kind of like the Stable Diffusion fingers, or DALI fingers, back in this time last year. So we've been doing this podcast last year. We could be chatting about going, yeah, but just the thing. It's all thumbs, man. Like 6 fingers. But then he got very good at doing fingers.
Yeah.
So I think we're better off and we're better protected to consider the idea that whatever these kind of VHS fuzzinesses that we have at the moment, that we think are kind of quaint, like going, we can always tell that that's that. I think the technology has suggested that that's a passing phase that will be gone very, very, very quickly. And so there's the ability to tell one from the other will not be there.
I seen this company that called Render. I think they're under a different name, but they're also Render. They did these Star Trek things for Gene Roddenberry archive. I mean, so they had Spock on the planet from when Kirk died in Star Trek Generations. It looks, it looks incredible. Like it's a deep fake, but I mean, I've never seen a deep fake that looks that real. Like it looks so real. I'll send it to you, but it's just the whole thing looks aesthetically amazing, because they like new Star Trek, they have it all like dark and shit, and I'm like, no, that's not Star Trek, but it's done like, it just looks so beautiful, and it's done with like obviously rendering, but rendering through AI and deepfake and stuff like that. So like you were saying, it will get to that point where it's going to be indistinguishable, and you were like, whoa, which is kind of scary too, like, because
but it's not even that far away. Like, I mean,
no.
all of if we just put a dystopian hat on for a moment, because I'm a bit tired from being positive for most of this interview. So if we can relax a little bit into the awfulness of what's coming, the 2024 elections in America are gonna just accelerate the use of every piece of crap.
Yeah.
In the worst ways imaginable. And so that really does mean that it's essential time to kind of get ahead of that, and to go, okay, if we can imagine it, so what should we do? So as opposed to going, when it comes to that stage, yeah, I think I can imagine that happening. Okay, let's imagine it's that case. So what do we do? And then it's kind of like, what do you mean? Well, imagine that there was like a virus that you had. And well, I don't know. I don't think that'll ever happen. Yeah, no. But for the sake of argument, let's just imagine that there was this thing. It was a bit like the cold or a flu that went everywhere. I don't know what the fuck. We don't need to talk about that. Well, maybe we do need to talk about that in advance of it, just so you know what I mean. It's not going to make it any more likely to happen, but a bit of preparation is no harm.
Yeah. I think the problem is humans, we always do things when it's too late. That seems to be our go thing.
Jesus, you're on a real.
I'm sorry, hey, sorry.
What?
Well, you said let's get dystopian here, so I was just
I said me get dystopian. That means you reverse it by taking up.
no.
Oh, yes, you got down deep end. Yeah, join me down here, kid.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
But I'm just saying, human beings do have that kind of tendency to go, oh shit. At the end, we seem to try and figure everything out. And I think with AI, it's too the cat's out of the bag type thing. Once you've connected AI to the internet, like that shit's never going back, you know. So it's not like it's something that's completely different that we've ever dealt with, sorry. You know, then we'll say a virus or something that's more organic because it's not organic. It's even though it's, you know, it's not um sentient, but then you kind of get into the question, well, what is sentience? You know,
Oh,
we sentience
exactly.
is based on what we deem sentient. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that danger, I think, and I think sometimes governments will always act last with stuff like that because people are going to tell them they'll be like, oh no, it's fine, you know, especially the Irish government.
Well, no, hang on. Well, um, you know, we are living in the heart of liberal Europe, and I never thought I'd be able to say that. You know, Ireland is a great country, um, and we know we're. It's amazing the changes that have occurred, and it's amazing you get someone like me saying something like that. Now I'm thinking, God, I don't think I'd say that, but it's true. Um, so when you say humans, but we always do this, or music is this, yeah, and you know you've got the weight of evidence with you, but it's more interesting as a thought exercise, I think, to go, well, what would it look like if it wasn't like that?
Yeah.
And then if that's the case, so I'll give you an example. I don't know,
Okay.
I've probably gone way over time or
No,
whatever,
no,
but
no, you can go. I've no time. It's if I'm taking up any of your time,
no,
you
no,
tell
no,
me.
no, no. So here's the thing. So how I got into this was because I I was teaching Ableton and I saw a change with my students, right?
Hmm.
They're using AI devices. And I knew that it was Wizard of Oz bullshit. No, seriously, because it was like if they were using a preset, they'd tamper with it, but because it had AI written on it, smart people were acting in very stupid ways.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is these people often would work in tech, and you'd be there going, "This is just marketed to you as," and I became interested in how quickly um, what you can basically describe as transfer of agency would occur, and how easy that was. So that led me into looking at what it might mean if music could be made by machines that sounded identical to that made by humans,
Right.
which was a philosophical question or a thought experiment at the time. And I only did finish my PhD 2 years ago. And at that point, it was like still a kind of a thought experiment. Now that's the stuff of what we do.
Hmm.
So when I was looking at it, I looked at the legal side. I figured out, so I did who's doing what where, which is straightforward enough. What are the legal implications, like in terms of copyright? And effectively, I realized that copyright, understandably being designed in the 1700s, really hadn't anticipated such things. And that brought it down to the area of ethics. And ethics meant, do we care? And if we care, what do we need to do about it? And I think that kind of logic is still where we are now, which is
Right.
like, okay, if we identify that these things are happening and we realize that the law cannot legislate for the invention of things or the interpretation of things, you know what I mean? Like, um, especially in something like music, and you wouldn't want it to either. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
then it comes down to, do we care? And if we care, first of all, who's the we? And then if the we is a large as body as you can imagine of people who like, listen, care about music, then you go, well, what do we do about it?
Hmm.
And first thing might be, well, we burn the AI at the stake or something, and we drown the AI. You go, okay, you can see the motivation there. But if we don't decide to become machine smashers, especially since most of the AI is ambient, it's going to be hard to do that. Um, and so, what else is there? And then that's where it starts getting interesting. because then it does come down to a level of kind of aspirational thinking where you go, okay, so what does matter? And for me, all I can figure out really is the idea of employment. And I don't mean Taylor Swift or Harry Styles employment, because they're always going to be okay. And the grandkids of the Marvin Gaye estate are going to be fine. But outside of that 0.5%, 1%, the rest of us, how do we fix that? How do we fix the thing that music is worth more than it's ever been worth, and yet less and less people are actually benefiting from that? And you just got to figure that out. And that's not particularly complicated.
Yeah. Do you think you could use AI with regards to, I'm sure it's used, I don't know, but like PR, say you have an album coming out, would you be able to like specifically use AI in that context to try and get it to, I mean, you know way more than I would, obviously, but do you think that's an area that AI could be used for in terms of something positive?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like these are weasel words, but I mean, I'd have to try to find where actually, I remember where it was from Water and Music. So Water and Music had to do a survey of musicians about what would they like AI to do, or if it was being used. The single biggest request was that it would save them time, and not time in, say, creating beats, but time in writing social media content in terms of marketing. And so again, that's kind of slightly counterintuitive, but you in as far as that it's not the first thing you would think of, but when you say it, it's obvious.
Right. Yeah.
But then using an 808 after it's been deleted because it's the most unpopular, and suddenly you go, oh no, we do use this thing called hip hop, and you go, what's that about? It's obvious after the fact. That's the beauty of these things. So,
well, it's like even over, like, we use oversampling on plugins now, so we get rid of that distortion. In a few years' time, that sound of not oversampling will eventually become a sound.
Yeah. If you exactly, the choice of distortion is a fantastic example, because the first thing about distortion is that it removes the idea that sonic fidelity is an end goal in itself. If you look at the range of plugins, like for instance distortions, you have things that, for instance, like saturators that are designed to make something to give you analog warmth, so that you put that onto a plugin and it's going to sound like an Oberheim or the valve circuitry of a Moog, or because it's got that bit of distortion on it. But at the same time, you use something like Redux, and what you're actually getting is digital distortion, which is the one thing that not so long ago it was conventional wisdom to say, well, one thing no one's ever going to want to hear is digital distortion. And oh God, yeah, there's no way. Which is a bit like saying there's one thing for certain, there's no way anybody's ever going to use the color green, right? You go, no man, there's no way, that could never be used. And what does that mean? It just means fashion changes, and so our tools and our tastes move with that.
Yeah, I think there's cool ways to use AI. Like I was thinking about, if you were doing harmonies, you don't want to hear yourself. You could obviously do your own harmony, and then machine learn with, say, Paul McCartney, Lennon, whatever, and have them harmonize in the background, so it gives you this texture. Do you know what I mean? I was thinking about doing something like that, so that could be kind of interesting.
Great. You get Bob in and write the lyrics. Prince, hey, little Stevie Wonder, come on, man.
But you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
It's like the Motown house band, your dream.
I think if you use it in that way, or like the way I remember I showed you a video, like just using it, but using it in, like, it's not a whole, it's a part of it, and you're just taking what you can. And
absolutely. I mean, the video, for instance, and for any of your listeners who haven't seen it, they should see it, because it's a really good piece of work. But I'm curious as well, how many man hours or person hours went into that
For me to edit that, oh, a
Yeah.
long time. Yeah.
Like what though? No, just to do. There's an important part here. Do a calculation, especially including rendering.
Oh, the rendering took fucking
No,
forever.
no,
Um,
that's so time. So,
the rendering took a few hours, maybe
but the
5.
whole thing from beginning to end, because there's a lot of concepts in there and a lot of.
Um, it'd be a few days work easily.
Is that all?
Yeah,
Okay, that's impressive.
yeah. But I'd be working all day, like it wouldn't be just 5 hours. I'd be doing like 10, 15, So,
Okay, so now we're getting close to probably somewhere between 40 to 50 hours in total, something like that, roughly.
but maybe even 35, 30. Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good
Um,
while. The rendering was the shit thing because it kept like stalling. I was like, fuck, and then I'd have to do it
yeah,
again. So it was
yeah.
like that was what, and just being meticulous on little things of me going back in, and so yeah.
And here's the thing, you didn't know, I was asking you about that. Was that done? Because I saw it was like 9 months ago. Was that right?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, that would have been. I started that probably just after Stable Diffusion got released in August. So yeah, so it would have been September. It came out in September. Sorry. So I did little bits in that, and then I was like, it was just taking me too long. So that program I was telling you about, Cafe
Yeah,
Night
yeah,
Cafe. So I
yeah.
used that, and that was just way easier for me to use with how I actually wanted it to look. I kind of had this certain look that I kind of wanted it, and it just perfectly kind of melded with it. So it was just handy. I'm sure now, like, you could do way more, but I
But
liked the idea.
that's what I was curious about, right? Was that in the space of 9 months, with the hours that you took. Now, if you take the concept that you had and the way that you can clearly see the parts that would have been intentional or storyboarded, or you know what I mean, like that.
Hmm.
So there's a clear. It's not or at least it doesn't appear to be a random series of images, right?
Mm.
Um, I was kind of thinking it is interesting in such a short space of time how much the speed plus, say, for instance, if you wanted the photorealism
Mm.
or the effects, or for instance, the range of things that you could add to that, whether that's the green screening type of things, which we've seen are now so easy. And I was going, it wasn't so much like, what would you do now with that? But what in 9 months' time
Yeah, yeah,
now
yeah,
would, and I just was thinking that's the amazing rate of change
yeah. It's
that
crazy, isn't it?
no, it literally is, and it's enough to drive everybody crazy.
Yeah, because when like now I remember I was thinking, I was like, man, if I had that now, I could do like certain things. But I kind of like it for the fact that it is what it is, and you know what I mean. Like, but now
Oh
you have
no, it
stuff like,
holds up as a piece of work. It
yeah,
holds
yeah.
up.
But like, like, I think so, like was going because there was certain things I couldn't do. It kind of made me do other things. I had to like, which that's what I like. That you just use it as a little starting point. It's like a little bit of paint, and then you can kind of go wherever you want from it. And but I wouldn't like to use that everything is just AI because then there's no real creativity in it. I think if you use it with your own thing.
Again, that's a selection of taste based on the tools and and I can see why you would make that. But the fact is that 9 months ago that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if you decided, well, apart from having John and Paul and backing vocals, it's me and Leonard Nimoy here at the front. There's two hermits, two Vulcan hermits hanging out. Do you know what I mean? And it'll look exactly like, in fact, it'll look a lot better than a lot of the Star Trek episodes. And 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 the fact that that kind of possibility is not a fantasy,
That's it, like that's
it
it.
that's the part that becomes very, I just think really, really exciting. And I think ultimately is where the hope in this comes. Because if we kind of say, that sounds like a lot of fun. Now,
Mm,
what do we do with that?
mm,
Like, where do you bring this? What
yeah.
story do you tell? As opposed to, like as I say, with the case with my students, it didn't last long. I mean, they immediately went, oh yeah, hang on a minute. You just lift the veil, and where they suddenly were going, okay, yeah, okay, no, oh, of course, this is just business as unusual. These are just new tools, new
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
Let's do something new with it.
Well,
So
like that's the great thing. Like for me, using stuff with like we'll say more so video stuff for me because I don't have money, so I kind of have to do everything myself. So that aspect of stuff that I can do with video that would take me forever if I wanted to go into After Effects and do some crazy
yeah,
stuff. Like it saves me time and also it gives you like because sometimes AI will put out some random shit that you're like, that is so crazy that I never would have thought about that. And then you can kind of use it and stuff like that. And like for me, with the record I'm doing at the moment, it's like concept album of dreams. There's that weird thing with AI, like I noticed the stuff you do with AI when you put it into it, it's like it sounds weird, but it's the same thing you see when you take like magic mushrooms. So like for me, it's like it's weirdly the same thing. So maybe that's just me sounding crazy. But anyway,
no,
there's that kind of thing of like that I can conceivably make a video for each song on my record. And I could never do that years ago. Like I just wouldn't be able to even. And if I did it, it'd look shit. Like, do you know what I mean?
there's an interesting area of investigation for you there. To consider machine hallucinations, human hallucinations, the space that's in between. What does that tell us about the other? Do you
I
know?
know. I've been thinking about that. Maybe AI is God.
Huh?
I was thinking maybe AI is God, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but
Well, it depends.
can't prove or disprove it. So who knows?
Well, no, well, yeah, there's that argument, but there's also the fact that there are many different notions of God,
Mm,
and AI would definitely constitute some interpretations of what a God would be. Certainly, those that would lend itself to being an oracle. Um, it, there's no escaping the fact that you know a duck's entrails were no, or a chicken's entrails were never designed to be um, a direct linked hotline to the heavens, but yet could be used in the same way as tea leaves might be used.
mm,
Um, so AI systems that are as capable as we have them now are definitely going to be used with that. And that's a kind of the part that, when it comes to the ethics of AI, I'm always very, very concerned about is that transfer of agency that we chatted about earlier.
yeah.
How easily we will, you know, um, give over to the machine, give over, and it's not even to a machine, to a cloud, to a whatever, um, and thus just like a spell, it has to be snapped out of it. And once you snap out, you go, oh, sorry, mate.
Yeah.
I was daydreaming. I was talking to the trees.
Yeah.
So, but it's only when the trees start talking back to you that you kind of have to be concerned,
Yeah.
or when they knock at your door. And in the case of that transfer of agency, we're in that kind of dangerous area. And when we come to the use of deep fakes, one of the saddest parts, I was chatting to somebody earlier and they were talking about you know, the potential misuse for political reasons of deep fake in rap culture.
Mm,
And I was going, yeah. And he was chatting and he asked me about it. And I thought then that, yeah, there's technical ways that you can use to identify authenticity and what something is and what it's not and da 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 da. But I also thought that the saddest part is that we'll also get to the stage where we just don't trust anything.
yeah. That's it, isn't it?
And that's the bit that's kind of like listening to John Lennon and, you know, and it not being John Lennon or Jay-Z or whoever it is that is your kind of personal kind of go-to inspirational voice. Um, and that's kind of where you start getting into this other stranger area where we become disconnected from the ability of arts to communicate and move us.
Hmm.
And there is a bit of the oversaturation of so much of everything. I know I spoke earlier about given the positive sides to that, but just like anything else, the notion of when we become completely desensitized, and there's no reason, to end up in those places without at least some form of resistance or conversation or going, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? that's where the Irish neutrality comes in. I genuinely believe that, like, in terms of going, this is just a load of old shite, fucking stop this crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
Because I, in the last year, I've done a lot of talking to people, all in all different straits, I guess mainly pivoting around music. And there is a commonality of, like, of agreement here that, something needs to be done. And it can't just disappear overnight, everything.
Yeah.
Even if what to do hasn't quite been decided, there's definitely a sense of, no, hang on a minute, let's get to grips with this. What are we doing?
Yeah. But you mean something needs to be done in what context, with regard to AI with music, or just?
Yeah, I mean, I work in music,
Mm-hmm.
so so it's in relation to music. My research is in AI, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's in that. And for me, the idea of doing something about it is intellectually engaging, right? Otherwise, you've got that kind of old. There's a saying, I can't remember who it was, that French saying, and I don't speak French. Après moi la deluge, right? Which is like, after me, you're fucked. You know what I mean? Which is something that that's not the literal translation, right? But after me, the flood, or you know what I mean? There's like,
Yeah. Okay.
meaning that the next generation are going to get it in the ear. It's fuck that. Come on, something can be done here.
Hmm.
And and there's enough people in positions of power and influence and just sheer exasperation who are asking the same kind of questions. So that's why I'm kind of hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Or I've completely lost my marbles, which is,
But you're more optimistic than pessimistic about the outcome of AI in general. I don't mean just connected to music.
no. If I was sitting here and you were asking me, um, like, okay, I'll give an example. I do some occasional, mean that if any of your listeners are interested, please, you can find me, right? Consultancy for, as a specialist, right? You get really well paid, right? And you can find yourself talking to people like hedge fund managers and stuff
Oh
like
wow.
this. Oh yeah, yeah, right. They come to someone like me. But to say, hey, listen, we're thinking of getting involved in this area. What do you reckon is the stuff? Now, when I'm speaking about that, that's not my opinion. I have to give my best analysis of where I think things are going. And on that, it's pessimistic.
Right. Right.
Because if someone's paying you to put it this way, you go to see a doctor, right? The doctor, you want a doctor to tell you what's going on. You don't want a doctor to go, hey, um, you know, do you ever
Yeah.
try meditation? And you're going, yeah, but I'm wondering about this lump, right? The point is, you need to know what it is.
Hmm.
So come back for a second. So hope is a choice, and it's an intellectual question. It's more intriguing to consider, what would it be like if things weren't fucked? How would that look? How would we go about that?
Hmm.
This is an interest. This is so what would you be doing with your time? Do you know what I mean? Existentialism is grand and fine, but it's more intriguing to kind of ask the other question, even if it's only a thought exercise. So yes, hope, absolutely.
Do you think the music business is fucked? It's probably been fucked for a long time. But
It depends on how you look at it in terms of an industry. So very
well,
simply. Music,
monetary for people, would say.
well, um, the value of copyrights have never been higher, all-time high. Queen's catalog there last week, but and that was only partial rights, was over $1 billion. So
Jesus,
yeah, right. Hedge
crazy.
funds, like private companies are coming in, investing money, safe as houses in music. Huge amounts of money going into music. Huge amounts of money going into.
But they'd be legacy acts, wouldn't they?
Well,
They're
hang on, no, hang on, hang on. Yes, but the fact is, huge amounts of money going into music. At the same time, there ain't no drip down, and there's no longer a middle class, even a working class in music.
mm,
So that disconnect, that doesn't make sense, and that's not going to. I believe that won't hold for too long. That's too feudal. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the peasants have to uprise and pull down the Taylor Swifts or the Harry Styles or anything like that. No, it doesn't. It just means that um, a more advanced form of economy goes, hey, we keep the castle, great, and we and us peasants, we like to go up to the castle. Castle's nice, right? But we just need a bit of plumbing down here.
mm.
Thank you very much. You know what I mean? And a couple of separate bedrooms be great. Do you know what I mean? And what I'm getting at. And so that's how capitalism evolved. And it's also perhaps how it will have to dissolve, because it won't be AI singing robots that get us. You know what I mean? They want to get, pessimistic, which I guess we should do if anybody else is listening to this at this point, right? The doomsday clock is whatever it is, like 40 seconds or away from
Pretty
thing.
close.
And then you've got the climate crisis occurring as well. So there's enough things to get everybody to kind of go, we need to fix this, and music can be a way to go about fixing it. Not that everybody, should be, has to be superstars or anything like that. But you should be able to make a living from music because there's enough money floating about. And again, anybody who tells you any different, you just look from which part of the castle they're talking to you from.
Yeah.
If they're down from the castle, you can understand why they're saying it. But if they're trying to get a car loan and they're a drummer, you can kind of see why that shouldn't be impossible to do if they're playing in bands and they're doing, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's not complicated. It really isn't, and it can be achieved.
yeah. Do you think Spotify kind of in a weird way democratized music? Because everyone could buy, like, if you look at the charts are vastly different because of Spotify, because not everyone has to go out and buy a CD. So if you're from a poor area, you can listen to Spotify, as opposed to, yeah, no, if you don't have money to go out and buy a CD, it's kind of democratized music in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do a bit of a dive on this one, right? First of all,
Okay.
I have a real problem with anybody offering me democracy, right? These tools will democratize you, right? That sounds very like certain governments in the late 1980s and certain, you know what I mean? Like bringing democracy to some, like,
I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying
no, what
that's
I'm saying is it's a shell game.
right.
When someone is offering you that, like a lot of the original AI music tools were saying, these tools democratize music making. And you're going, how? Because they're copyright free. And you're going, and I just went, fuck you, you. Seriously, that was in my I had to take out gags and all the swear words, right? Because you're not allowed to do that in academic talk. But a con is a con, and that's what that was. So the thing about it is that when I first started making music, the means of production, to use these kind of terms, were capital intensive, which meant you couldn't make a record that sounded like the Beach Boys unless somebody else was giving you enough money, the equivalent of which you would have bought a very nice 3-bedroom house, right, at the time. So so clearly the means of like who got to make records that sounded like records was that. That changed, and the apotheosis of that, I guess, was GarageBand. So the fact that now there's a mobile recording studio on that, but that's as much democracy that is needed for music making tools.
Mhm.
Spotify pays 70% of what they earn back to the rights holders. So, ultimately the question isn't really with the DSP. It's to do with the fact that at some point along the way, in the book that I did, Scott Cohen, who's a big figure in music, said somebody made a decision at that point that music was worth the price of a piece of chewing gum.
Mm.
And, I hear what you're saying about, allowing access to music. There's a lot of truth in that. But music lovers could always find a way to get to listen to music.
Yeah.
Usually by bootlegging or no, seriously, like if you didn't have any, I remember I had a record deal for quite a while, and then when I lost it all and I was broke, I lived in a flat, and the guy who lived downstairs, we lived in HMV, and I found out that they could take home 3 CDs per night, and I literally taped the whole store. Right, with diligence, right? Because if you love music, like every night he would leave 3 CDs outside my room. I'd tape them and have them back outside his room when he went to work.
Wow.
I just worked my way through the whole shop, right?
Wow.
So the point about it is that that's intellectual property theft. But then that was HMV anyway, and they ripped. Point is, you find a way if you want music, if you love music.
Yeah.
A way to get it.
Yeah. What label were you on that you got dropped from?
Oh,
If you can say it.
a few. I was with. I had the first time round. It was actually was with Mother Records, which was used two's
Oh,
first.
wow.
Yeah, first. Yeah, and then we went to Island Records and were with them
Big
for
one.
a while, and then went to Virgin Records
Wow.
with them. So yeah, that was my training in the ways of the castle.
Yeah.
But the point was at that time, you know, like Van Morrison would have been got dropped because he was only selling to 150,000 records in America or something. Like, you know what I mean? Notions of what success were and failure
Okay, yeah.
were not anything like the way it is now, which is just nonsensical.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that rich artists get paid too much. That's not the issue. It's just that there is no reason to have it so stratified, and we see that in many walks of life. So it's not just here in music, but I think in music we can see that that it's important. And as I said to you earlier about COVID, that gives the example that we care about music.
Yeah.
Governments intervene and supports are in place, and so there's a willingness there, and that's all. That willingness needs to be done, needs to be harnessed, and then using technology to help do it. But the technology won't of itself, do you know what I mean, do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the good thing about it is I don't think labels have as much power as they used to have of like they still have power, but they don't have like the power of like we were saying, if you want to make a Beach Boys ish record now, you can actually do it. Whereas years ago, you needed a big budget. You can make records now that sound great that you could never do years ago, like something like 20 years ago. I won't be able to do what I could do now, you know. So in that aspect, you've kind of gained something. You've lost something, but you've gained something, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, but when you have a situation where, I'll give you a couple of numbers on this kind of stuff. So last year, Apple Music and Spotify were very proudly announced that they had just passed the 100 million track mark. Yeah. At the same time, the amount of music being released started getting weird. So you have, for instance, a piece of technology like BandLab. You know BandLab? Do you ever use
Yeah,
BandLab?
yeah, yeah.
So BandLab had 60 million subscribers. and who produced an average of 4 tracks per user.
Right.
That was last year. There's a little bit of AI involved in that, but a lot of the music actually can make its way up onto the DSPs, which is fine too, because you can do. But prior to that occurring, another figure came out, which I thought was really interesting, which was what was the percentage of music that was on Spotify that wasn't listened to once last year?
What was that?
Well, what do you think? Not once, like so music's on Spotify. Forget about the Bandcamp thing, because I wasn't involved in it.
Like individual songs or just artists?
Individual songs, tracks.
Okay. I've definitely had some that haven't listened to once, so I'm probably in the geez, percentage wise, I'd say 40.
Yeah, you're right, 30.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow.
The artist or the artist's guardian or friend. So again, it's funny that term of that, if you think about it, that 30% of the music was made by hermits who don't even listen to bring us back to the very beginning of the conversation, because there is something about that word that's useful. And if we think about that in terms of numbers and consider that as preposterous as that sounds, that is nothing like the way that is going. And this is prior to the ability of AI to just spout out huge amounts. One of the things with AI music that's always been there is this sense of the proliferation of music and what it would mean. It's only recently becoming an issue for labels because they're worrying about copycats. But there's also the issue in terms of the sheer, do you know, for instance, that it's less ecological to stream music than it is to make CDs?
That's mad, isn't it?
Right? Just because we have these data centers, these huge data farms that are used to host all that music that we don't listen to, right?
Makes sense.
Now, it makes sense, but then when we consider that the DSPs themselves, like Spotify, have never turned a profit, right? You're going, what? But they're the sponsors of Barcelona, and you go, yeah, I know, we live in this kind of very weird world, right? But where success isn't quite like, but they're the ones who go, yeah, I know, but how come no one's making any money? I don't know, but like even Spotify aren't making any money. Well, somebody is somewhere, right?
Yes.
And what does any of this mean? It means that we're only at the tip of those kind of numbers,
Right?
Because the weirdest thing about Bandcamp for me was that of those 60 million users was the fact that they only made 4 tracks. Now, if you arm Bandcamp with full AI, at the moment it's only got the little starter like, hey, you're having a writer's block, hit the button, we'll give you everything. But if you have generative text to music kind of ideas in the way that we have with Stable Diffusion or with DALL-E 2, where we can create unlimited content, well, what percentage then will the music that's sitting on Spotify that was burnt a hole in some continent, do you know what I mean? To host, is it going to be 90% of the music that's hosted that no one listens to for no reason? And it's those kind of things that we start going, oh, hang on a minute here. We just got to join up these dots. We've just got to join up this picture, because only by doing that do we reveal the absurdity of the situation that we're in. And then with a sense of humor and a bit of belligerence, it's possible to come up with going, okay, enough is enough now.
Yeah.
So surely we can do better than that. And we can do better than that, because if we don't, there's going to be nobody left around to listen to any of the music.
Like as a musician yourself, do you ever feel like sometimes when you're making music and you put all this effort into it, you're like, why am I doing do you ever I feel like that a lot. I think as I get older, I'm like, why am I putting all this stuff into it? Because I don't know, for in the past, I've kind of probably relationships have gone and certain things, I've probably put too much into it, and you kind of look back and you're like, what have I done all this for? Like sometimes, do you ever feel like that wave? Like, but that's probably personal. I don't mean
No,
it.
no, no, it is. I can speak on behalf of a lot of people, I think, here, in the sense that I never really, like, I mean, for me, I never really enjoyed making music that much.
Okay.
So, but it was something that I learned to do. And I'm actually pretty good at doing it in a funny kind of way. So I like pressure and uh, a reason to do something, usually an impossibility. Maybe that's how can you make this thing occur, which you're not supposed to be able to make occur on a budget with nothing to do that or to do blah. Do you know what I mean? And so I like those kind of those things, and that would intrigue me then to make things happen. But left to my own devices, I wouldn't, and I don't, and I wouldn't dream of making stuff unless there was a reason for it. That said, that's an unusual perspective. What I do know is that, and I'm seeing I've been doing a lot of interviews, and I was asking writers how do they feel about automated content, like how does it make them feel? How would they like? And I don't mean it in a hey, walk a mile in the shoes of a musician type thing. I was actually mean genuinely, hey, you've got a particular writing skill. How would you feel like if your editor trained the AI on your past articles and then just basically started releasing them?
Yeah.
And was like, well, and what became interesting for me was that the idea that the demoralizing effect of what would it be like if the machine trained on you was not only doing it, but doing it you on your best day.
Every day it does it.
This is the part that where things are going to, if we start getting into kind of a Black Mirror situation, if we have some thought exercises, where human musicians in competition with the AI version of themselves could be faced with a situation where the AI version of themselves is actually a better version of them. And that in order to compete with themselves, they have to use these tools to enhance, and we see a lot of that being played out in the questions that are occurring in film. And they're a unionized industry, which music isn't.
Yeah.
So they actually have a voice of where they can strike and they can go, hey, whoa, enough of this, right?
Yeah.
Because in music, of course, we don't have that commercial need for new content that streamers would have. So, if songwriters went on strike, it'd be like,
Don't give a shit.
well,
Yeah. I read about like there was people saying that film company was they were getting AI to write, with say, for a TV show, and then they were getting the writers to edit the stuff to make. And I'm thinking, come on, man, like, how could you do that to people? Like, that is definitely demoralizing to people.
well, I actually had to do this thing. It was last night, and there about I was doing a thing about film, and I don't
Mm.
know why. So I didn't know much about it, so I did some research and I had to answer some questions about it. And I realized it was like it's a boom time if you're dead, right? It's a great time to be dead. But if you're and I realized that actually there's truth in that. The three things that the writers strike, and they're interesting if you look about them in terms of how they might apply to music. First one is no use of training sets. So you can't train on the work of your work as a writer. The
All
next
right.
one is that you promise, right, that you won't give us a script treatment that's been generated by an AI. And then so the producer, the executive producer, goes, no, I promise. I was out with my kids and my kid said to me, you know what I mean? Like, so I have this idea of, yeah, they're going, this is the 10. And then the third one was, oh yeah, so you won't ask us to work on the one that you spoke about. We won't use the training sets. And the third one is interesting, is that an AI won't be credited as the author of the work.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's legal reasons for that, and it's all to do with, but also, um, it's it's something as simple as that. It looks like that's an issue of professional pride or something, but it's actually it's multifaceted,
Yeah.
and once you dig into that, you're screwed.
Have you heard the get back stems of where they took it's a video where it shows how they isolated everything with AI. He used a program called Mal, I think it was called.
Oh, the one where is this where the monophonic recordings were separated into?
No, no, this is for the Get Back documentary. I know what you're talking about, Revolver. No, this is like where they maybe might have been they might have been in mono. But anyways, there's a video online where it shows them playing
Yeah,
in the Twickenham, and then it just isolates and turns Ringo's drums completely off, and then just Paul singing, and then it turns him off and has Ringo playing. Like just like the isolation is incredible. Have you seen that video?
no,
Oh man, it's so good. Like it sounds, it's just it's so incredible what that technology do. That what's it, Wingnut? I think that's it. Wingnut. That'd be Peter Jackson's
yeah,
technology
yeah,
that
okay.
they did how they did the Get Back stuff. So it was his stuff that was involved, obviously, with the Revolver release where they took all the stuff and separated all that kind of stuff. I was just wondering, did you see that?
No, but it's becoming it's funny. I've never really been interested in the idea of stems. I mean, I know in a curious way, you listen to a multi-track and you go, hmm. But I know that that the most interesting thing about stems is how crap certain things are. You EQ them in order that they sound magnificent in the finished piece of noise. Do
Mm,
you know,
mm,
is
mm, mm.
stereo recording. So um, I, I like um, I like the noise of a recording, um, and and it probably does come from a very primitive, naive approach to music, where it's just that thing. Do you know what I mean? When I teach, for instance, I teach with this guy called Vasilios Gorgorinas, who's like a really brilliant engineer,
Mm.
and he hates it, right? Because when we teach together, um, and people are asking about equipment, I always say they ask about speakers, and so he goes, "Oh, what's your budget?" And we go, "Well," and I ask the question, saying, and every time I say it to me, he goes, "Oh no, my God, stop it!" And it's like, theoretically, if you had 500 quid, would you be better off with two stereo 500 quid speakers or one speaker from €1,000 system, right?
Mm.
And I kept saying, "Oh, no, no, no." And I was going, "Well, but no, because you use headphones all the time. So you're using it for reference. Obviously, you're going to lose you're going to lose all your stereo. But if you're
Yeah,
checking the frequencies and you're hearing it in the room, and you're worried about this fidelity thing, surely the idea is that and so the idea is to get you thinking about, you know, and it's the same kind of thing about where there isn't an answer to it, by the way. The last time I checked with Vass, he's thinking maybe the one speaker. He takes it quite seriously.
yeah,
Uh, I just did it as a thought experiment in order to experiment with getting people to think. There's no particular answer to it. But I like to hear music, just from another room or um, so the idea of stems is this just seems a lot of the time something's not quite right about it.
yeah. Yeah, there's definitely something about like you were saying, like if you can hear bass differently and how it wobbles and shit like that. Like I always mix in mono. There's something about mixing in mono because then you can kind of pinpoint things more accurately. And if it sounds good in mono, it's kind of normally going to sound
Yeah,
good when you expand it. Like those old Phil Spector records sound incredible. There's a wall of sound of just everything coming at once. There's just something brilliant at that.
yeah. I mean that's why. But we also used to have uh, when I was learning about recording, I got to work in all the top, like a lot of the top studios around the world, and always in the middle of every studio was an Oratone speaker.
Ah, wow.
And you'd go, so regardless of whether, it was like a, you know, fuck, I can't even remember all their names, but you know, Olympic Studios in London, or those places in LA, Ocean Way, those type of places and stuff. There'd always be this shit speaker and the middle, and it was like, and this was an Oratone speaker, and I think they were like $50, and it was in the center of every studio. I know the reason was that represented what it would set, what the recording would sound like on AM radio,
Right.
because that's what the majority of the things are. So now it's our phones. So what does it sound like? And, you know, our phones are, the quality is amazing. Like the laptop I'm using, I'm amazed by the spatial sounds that's coming out of it. So again, whatever the medium of the day is, how you hear music, you know.
Yeah. What was your favorite studio you worked in?
I'd honestly say I think my favorite studio I ever worked in was a bed sit that was running on a meter. Seriously,
No
after
way.
after I'd stayed in all of these very, very, very expensive recording studios, and I had a friend who I'd started using when I was finishing working in America. The Atari's computers started being used with Cubase, and so hard disk recording and samplers. I think I was the first, probably one myself, the guy I was working with, the first people to bring them to Ireland. So a friend of mine, we made a record where he promised me he'd give up drinking if I made a record for him. And we made this record, and we had no MIDI. I had MIDI, but we had no sync, and absolutely no money, and 16-track recorder. And my God, to me, it sounds like Outcast. Do you know what I mean? It's like revolutionary.
Brilliant.
And so the point about that is that was my favorite studio, because you had complete freedom because of the limitation, and no expectation other than like nobody caring,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and yet passionately caring yourself. So yeah, that's it. That'd be my favorite recording studio.
That's
It's the
cool.
same thing. What's your favorite glass of wine? It's one drank from your favorite glass. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and that's how it works. It's the same thing. So
Yeah. I do feel like I would have loved to have been in that. Like that's totally beyond me. I was never in the whole studio thing. Like I started working on Pro Tools and stuff like that. So I never got into that like I recorded in studios, but I never, it wasn't my thing of like that's the only way you could record. And I kind of always wondered like, like those records like Talk recorded in all those different places.
oh yeah, I know. And in fairness, that like I was lucky enough to learn with people who like, but there's a couple of things that now seem so counter, uh, just so what? It's like a record producer would never touch the desk, right?
Oh,
Even if they had been an engineer. So when I was being trained, the
wow.
producer would be a producer, right? And there was an
Yeah.
engineer, and then there was an assistant engineer and a tape op. Now the tape op and the assistant engineer had jobs to do. They weren't just there for decoration, but it was very much like the producer's job was to listen to music, to work in a kind of as a manager of certainly of the session, because the money would have been very expensive, the timeline and all that, getting the
Hmm.
project done on time. But the idea that they would, in fact, there's a couple of producers who I worked with who were, no, I remember working with Peter Walsh, who went on to do all Scott Walker's records, right? And he had been originally an engineer.
Amazing.
And yeah, and when I worked with him, he just come back from working for the first time with Scott Walker, and he was kind of going, I just worked with this really weird guy, right? And and I was going, really? And he goes, Scott Walker. I was going, yeah. I think that was the Hunter album, whatever.
Oh yeah, Climate of the Hunter.
Yeah. And he told me this story where he said, like, I was in this room with this guy, and he goes, um, because and he did his voice because Peter Walsh was his English, and he kind of it sounds very like this. It's like the shape of a triangle. I need you to make it more sound like that. And he left the room and he said, what the fuck? I don't know what the fuck I was doing. Now, it's funny, years later, knowing that that was the response of an engineer at that point, working as a kind of producer going, what the hell does that even mean? And he had just come from that session thinking it could have just been that weird thing. Like he would go on to work with him then for the rest of his career. So really they worked out what a triangle meant and what a square meant, and that became their language of communication. But the interesting part was that at that time, even if a producer had trained as an engineer, when they moved up to that point, first of all, there would often be a pay drop for them, right? Because the prestige of becoming a producer meant you were getting points, but you might be a successful engineer, so it was job of work. But it was kind of like if they touched a desk, it was like, hey, let me take this for a little spin. Isn't that kind of cute? Like, imagine a director going behind a camera, going, hey, let me show you how I used to do this. It's the same thing, like maybe if they were a great guitarist. I remember working with Ian Brody from the Lightning Seeds. You know that? Right? He's a great guitar, like amazing guitarist.
Really?
And, yeah, incredible. And I'm not. And he goes, hey, and he has Liverpool accent. I remember picking up the guitar and playing. I was going, jeez. And he's going, so maybe something. And I was going, I remember picking up the, and it's the same thing. As a producer, you don't. And I was just thinking, that sounds. You keep on the bit, push play and record. That's great. Oh no, you do your own thing. Oh, no. Point being, we've got to the stage that's now not known that it wasn't always like that. So we have the cult of the engineer, and all the YouTube videos about music making are about this idea of, well, I use these kind of EQs and I do this and da 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 da, and that makes for good YouTube tutorials.
Yeah.
But the other way of music was very much more planning of execution of budgets and timing, and realizing how much time you could have facilitated for these overdubs. So a lot of practical stuff. And then the other stuff is very much like the stuff that you only really hear someone like Rick Rubin talking about, where you're creating a kind of a mise-en-scene, an atmosphere or a moment or an approach. And that's kind of lost because their skills that they're like the skills that you'd learn through apprenticeship, that you'd only their tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think that's lost, and that's a terrible shame. And it also means that this very engineering, technical, and to me, that was just inconceivable that a functional job would become something that would be elevated to this level of worship. And I think that's probably had its day, and will be AI is definitely going to knock off a bit of that.
Yeah, it's funny though, we're talking about like stuff about everyone playing in the room, and even like talking about Talk, like that album. Do you know the Spirit of Eden, the album Talk? It's just incredible. Like, but like they did it like they would do an album now, like everyone recorded separately, and then they like put in the Mitsubishi and spliced it up. And I mean, but that sounds like a band playing. I think that's the genius of it. Like,
yeah, I think the key word there is genius. Do you know what I mean? Like if you take all of the Talk albums and include Mark Hollis's solo album as kind of the last album. No, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's brilliant. Like,
yeah, but the fact is that is a work of genius. And whether that's like Pet Sounds, where it's worked on and worked on and worked on, or Kind of Blue, where you go, hey, this is John, okay, and Bill's on piano, let's go. Right? Which, of course, it wasn't quite like that, but it was close enough for it to be like that. Or Astral Weeks being improvised over whatever period of time, as opposed like, or albums that are, can take a century to do, or whatever, I mean, in terms of hours to pull together. There's genius is that different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so those talk albums are that. Do you know what I mean? For me, I think they just, so how they did it is a bit like, I was just thinking there, give me a Stratocaster, and like, I know I ain't never going to play like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Like, this is what he did. You're going to go, yeah, but the missing ingredient is the fact that they were talk, and whatever forces were in play within the band, or the pushes and the pulls, and the all those things led to those things happening, and just a moment in time, and great records.
I think that's the cool thing though about like people like that would say that are just high up there. They're the reason that it gives people the reason to do music, because you're like that romanticism, like if I feel like shit, I'll watch something on the Beatles or something like that, or like Miles Davis or Coltrane or whatever like that, and you get that vibe. You're like, oh shit, man, that's why you get excited again, and that's I think that's the great thing, and I would hate to see if AI could take that away in the way of like, because it could do like it's like playing chess against AI. It's the most pointless thing you ever do. I've played some games of chess. I played the most perfect game of chess ever, and they'll destroy me. You can never win, and that's the kind of thing that could be quite dangerous of like that AI could pose of.
Well, just on that one, and there's
Yeah.
a positive one for you. So, we didn't speak about this earlier, I don't think. Gary Kasparov was a fairly good chess player in his time.
Pretty good, yeah.
And when he was beaten by Deep Blue,
Mhm.
he went into a big depression, right? And he writes about it in the book. I can't remember, it's called Deep something or other. Somebody, I don't know. And what's interesting about it is that he comes out the other side of it, and he's kind of going, what he realized was that to become a chess master, you had to be really privileged. So you had to have certain training, you had to have certain opportunities in life, you had to, like, a number of things had to actually to make that pinnacle of being the best, chess player in the world.
Mhm.
Accidents of birth had to happen.
Okay.
And he said that what he came to realize was that now there's no question that the best chess player in the world was no longer human. However, the average level of chess playing had just gone through the roof. So across the board, because people were able to access a higher level of chess, they were becoming better and better and better. So the question then is that the way for us to go with music? And that is the way that it will go with music if we get it right. Because access to music education, musical instruments is privileged. And we might say, well, I know everybody I know has access to, yeah, okay, but we live in Ireland. Yeah, but everybody I know, okay, yeah, but we're all kind of like European here, you know what I mean? Like, just pull it out of the globe and you're going to find out that it isn't all equal. And AI can definitely help in terms of education in that way. That's a real positive. And in doing that, the potential, despite all the music being made and despite the idea that we've got very short listening attentions, we can become better at music.
Mhm.
The standard music playing in Ireland has, for instance, I think has gone through the roof because of I believe, the colleges that are there, but also because of wedding bands and the standard that's occurred there, and the way that a lot of musicians have moved into those commercial ways where they might have been snobbish about it.
Mm.
But now that if you're going to get paid for playing at a wedding, you've got to be, I would never have got away with it.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Maybe I could have got away DJing or being a clown or something, but I couldn't have played to have the chops for that. Now that's taken for granted. So that's the positive side to it. You just got to make sure everybody can find a way of making a living from it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have a plan, but I'll come back to you in a future episode to tell you what the plan is.
Okay, good. I'll hold you to that. Okay. That's a good way to end it. And hey, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Sorry if I went too long and
No,
tangents.
no, no, no. I'm sorry I was late.
No, no, you were perfect. Don't worry. Oh,
No,
good.
but listen, it's only in conversation that, certainly for me, that certain parts of all of this make sense. They become crystallized. So thank you for having the time, and good luck with the editing.
Cheers. Cheers. I really enjoyed the thing. I'll send you those Beatle tracks. They're not Beatle tracks.
Oh, listen, I can guarantee you that over the weekend, a load of different things will occur to you going, all right. So please, when you think of other things going, oh, we were talking about that,
Yeah.
do send it through, because I'll be very curious.
I will do.
Take care.
I'll let you know when the podcast is out, and I'll send you that stuff too.
Take
All
care.
right, dude. Cheers, brother. Bye bye.